On today's episode, we're going to talk about a concept called the business life cycle. A lot of businesses, and especially being a business owner myself, they go through a lot of ups and downs, trials and tribulations. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a little bit of perspective in building a business and kind of knowing which time that you're in and what phases are coming up for you. And hopefully this will help you, give you some insight as how to keep a great mindset while building your business. So stay tuned. In this episode, the Coleman Nation. Here we go. So as you guys may or may not know, I mean, sometimes I've talked about this in various episodes and whatnot. My background is in advertising and marketing. I ran an agency, for several years, and it was a lot of fun. It was really stressful, and we did a lot of cool design work for companies like Warner Brothers and Gene Autry and a couple other big accounts. Speedo was another one of my accounts, and this was over 20 years ago. One of the things that I came to notice just being in business today, in American business today, was that there was a lot of different phases that my business would go through personally. Every person wants to like have everything right out of the gate just be, you're just hitting home runs business wise, that you're just like crushing it right out of the gate. However, that's not always the case. And so one of the concepts that I had, this was something that had kind of given me some insight about business and expansion, was just what are some of the phases that business are going through. And again, the outcome that I have for you in listening to this is going, oh, wow, okay, so my business is, I thought I was over here in this area, but I'm really over here. And this is some of the trials that I'm going through. And okay, what can I expect as we kind of move through, the next phase? And the example that I'm going to give you is Starbucks, and that's the one that I'm going to kind of like harken back to a bunch because I think that that's going to give you some really good perspective. And why? Because Starbucks is a company that I think we can all relate to. We've all, probably been to a Starbucks at one point in our lives. And, but in this particular case, what is the first phase or the first stage of the life cycle of a business, right? The first phase is unknown. And what do I mean by that? Is it's just that nobody knows who you are, And so if you look at Starbucks back in the day, there was, probably one Starbucks in Pike Place Market. And it was just sort of a nondescript hole in the wall coffee shop, in the Pike Place Market. And so I had a chance to firsthand see this place that was now, ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And at that time, there was only the one. So that would be the first phase, is it's unknown. Nobody knows who they are. Okay. Then, through the 80s and into the 90s, they started to expand. I still had never really heard, of Starbucks in the mainstream until probably the mid 90s. And I remember going to Glendale, California, and I remember we'd go to Starbucks, it's just like one of those things. Hey, you want to go for a coffee run? And I walked into the Starbucks, and the lady, and I want you to listen to this because how it was presented to me was all about the marketing. And what it was in I got to say, it was probably around 1995, maybe 96-ish, that range was when the Frappuccino came out. I was blown away. I walked into Starbucks just to get my regular, coffee that I would get every day. And the lady, she had these little straws that were kind of cut into pieces, and these little tiny like shot cups, right? These little plastic shot glasses. And she goes, "Would you like to try a Frappuccino?" And I said, what the hell is a Frappuccino? And she goes, "Well, it's a blended coffee beverage." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Yes, it's our new blended coffee beverage." And I was like, "Dude, seriously, it's a coffee milkshake, right?" But the marketing and the branding of it was a blended coffee beverage. And so I was like, all right, let me check it out. So I grabbed this little sample, and I don't know, I had like some cookies in it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And she's like, "Yeah, you can customize it. Just tell us what syrup you want." And I was like, "I could have any of these syrups." She's like, "You have any of the syrups?" Thank goodness for the fast metabolism of a 21-year-old at that time, right? And I got this thing and I was like, dude, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so this is where we got into the second phase of business, which is a novelty act, right? And so this was an absolute novelty. I left there, I jammed that drink. I went over to back to my cubicle at work. I said, seriously, drop what you're doing. Pencils down, heads up, pencils down. You guys got to check this thing out. And my coworker's like, dude, what's going on? I said, and I was probably pretty jittery from just having pounded, freaking 2,000 calorie caffeine bomb. And so they're like, what are you talking about, bro? And I said, everybody, we're going to go on a field trip. And I told everybody to just get in my car. And I took all my coworkers that would fit in my car. And we walked in and I went into the lady. I was like, hey, lady, give them the experience. And she said, oh, the experience. I said, yeah, the little shot glasses with the straws, give us the whole spiel. And she's like, oh, you want to know about the Frappuccino? It's our new Starbucks blended coffee beverage. It's unbelievable, blah, 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 blah. And my coworkers looked at me like I had lost my mind. Like, you've got to be freaking kidding. Like, you told us to drop everything that we're doing so that we could go get a coffee milkshake. And I was like, guys, seriously, don't knock it till you try it. You can order anything, all of these syrups from mint to hazelnut to vanilla to orange to whatever. You can put it in the drink. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And so, for the next couple of months, we were doing, Frappuccino runs every day. And then what's the next phase, right? Is that you go into a phase called social acceptance, right? Where the business is now sort of wound its way into the conversation of society. And there was a period of time where it was like, hey, you want to go get a cup of coffee? And the language switched to, hey, you want to go grab a Starbucks? Was that they were able to take this concept and completely own that space, And I think that a lot, Google has done it. Their brand becomes the word that is now replaces every. Kleenex is another example, right? That's really what you want to strive for as far as marketing and messaging. So you hit that social acceptance and people are just starting, that's the language. Hey, you want to go grab a Starbucks? You want to grab a Starbucks? You want me to grab you a Starbucks, right? So that's social acceptance. Then the next phase, this is the dream phase that everybody wants to go through. This is the phase that everyone wants in their business, is popular and explosive growth. And you look at the fact that, Starbucks went through this, and I remember it was like, we'd go to this one Starbucks. There was one in Pasadena. There was one in Glendale. You'd see one randomly, if you were in a big city or something like that. And the next thing you know, boom, it was almost like there was one on every street corner, right? And they were just going up at a furious rate. In fact, I remember that there was a Starbucks across the street from another Starbucks. You go into to this phase of your business, and it is almost like you can't stop it from exploding. You can't stop it from expanding. And then you hit the next phase, right? So this would be like the fifth sort of phase of the life cycle of a business is plateau. And I remember reading an article that said, you know what? Starbucks bit off more than they could chew, and they had to close a bunch of locations, and they were pulling back, and they were going to reassess, and they weren't as profitable in some markets. And I was like, oh, wow. They just hit the plateau phase. Well, every business is going to go through this, and there's some businesses that go through this phase over and over and over again. So they'll go through, unknown, or they're releasing a new product, and they go through novelty, and then they go, then boom, they have a big explosion, and then they plateau and maybe taper down. And then they go, oh, how can we, rebrand ourselves? Boom. And then they have another growth phase, and then they plateau again. And I think that, this is really, really important to understand, because as a business owner, you might think, man, I really wish that I was in the popular and explosive growth phase, but you might be in the unknown phase, and you start thinking, oh, this sort of envy starts to set in where you go, I wish that I had that over there, but I'm over here. But now that oh, okay, good. So I'm unknown. Okay, so how do I get myself known? Okay, now we'll go through being a novelty act. Okay, great. So people are starting to hear of us. And the next thing you know, we're going to go from there, and we're going to wind up, expanding. And then we're going to become socially acceptable, meaning everybody's going to kind of know our name. And the next thing you know, boom, explosion. And then when you get to the plateau, you just have to identify it, and they go, oh, okay, good. How can I create a new explosion? How can I make another, path to growth? Sometimes it's just a little bit of rebranding. Sometimes it's looking into new markets and being able to expand, right? Sometimes it's being able to take, something that you've had before and just repackaging it and then relaunching it all over again. Some businesses will wind up, having a renaissance or a reemergence. And the example that I always think about is Apple. And Apple was definitely 100%, I think it was late 90s, they were in this sort of like, this plateau phase, right? Then Steve Jobs goes to Next. He has his strategy to be able to come back, take over Apple again. And then he released the iMac. And then they started coming out with, even more powerful stuff. And then they started, having some really great alliances like Adobe and Macromedia and some of the other big companies. And then that sort of plateaued all through the mid 2000s. And then they released the iPod. And then after that, they released the iPhone. And so you can see Apple is probably the best example of hitting a plateau and then catapulting or slingshotting to the next level and really building a strong brand, and then boom, rebranding and building all over again. So that's one of the best examples, and this is the last point that I'll make on this. In my opinion, there's really 4 types of people that are what I would call innovators. And, these would be people like, Bezos, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. I mean, in across the boards in many industries, right? They look at something and they go, there's got to be a new and better way to bring that product to market. Then there are the people that are what I would consider the early adapters, right? And the early adapters, they see what the innovators have done and they 100% go full bore and they go, man, I'm behind that innovator. I'm going to own this right away. Then there's the late adapters. And they're the people who go, I want to wait till the bugs are worked out, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to see what's going to happen. And then you have the people that are just stuck in the past, that are just like, living in the past and like, I wish I would just go back to the days of the flip phone. And they're like, okay, these people are going to completely miss the boat, And so you just have to sort of act appropriately. And I think that this is, again, not investment advice in any way, shape, or form, but it's something to be able to look at. Am I around people that are innovative? Or am I someone that's an early adapter? Or am I going to wait until the bugs are worked out? Or am I going to talk about the good old days? And you start to see a pattern of how businesses expand and they breathe. And there's this sort of ebb and flow, to these businesses. And I think that this is really, really, it's something just to have as an insight, as to, how these businesses, can expand. And, so hopefully you had, this is some good information, if nothing else, to give you a little bit of inspiration and perspective if you're a business owner. And I'd love to hear about it. If you're a business owner and you're, you feel like, man, this really makes sense to me. I'm in this phase. I'd love to hear about your business. I'd love to hear about what you're doing and, what's sort of your action plan. If you want to leave that in the comments below, I'd be excited to be able to read those. All right. So if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you hit the like button. Also, make sure that you subscribe and, and turn on those notifications so that when we release new content, that you're the first person to be able to know that it's up there. And again, we appreciate you. Thanks for jumping on here and spending your valuable time with us here on the Coleman Nation. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.